I feel so tired. It was literally 15 minutes in. I was like falling asleep. I think it was like, it wasn't the most thrilling start to the film, but also just like a long work week. I was just sat there like, I'm not mentally prepared for this for 2 more hours.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not a very easy way into the film. It really doesn't take any mercy on anyone who has to watch it. They just kind of have to figure out what's going on while it's running at full speed.
Hello and welcome to the Home Screen Podcast. This is episode 15. Today I'm joined again by Dan.
It's lovely to be here, my friend.
This is a special, monumentous occasion. We have just watched the magnum opus of Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis, in the opening night, potentially the only night it's in cinemas.
We saw it in IMAX, my God.
4 rows from the front, neck pains.
Seeing giant Adam Driver face blown up on the screen, truly a powerful thing.
So this is a very divisive one amongst the film community that have seen it. So we're going to do our best to try and avoid spoilers the first few minutes, but it's just so much more funny just to rip into this and just talk about just the insane things that happen. This is a film that has some really good things and really bad things, so it's a real mixed bag, but we definitely both had fun with it. I'm not really going to read the synopsis because I honestly think the best way to enjoy this film is just to go in blind and just witness this old man's mad vision of his swan song film with no restrictions. So the loose plot description I can say really is the main character played by Adam Driver, who is Caesar Catalina. He essentially has this vision of utopia with a material that is kind of self-sustaining and can be crafted into whatever you want it to be. He also seemingly has the ability to pause time, which is never really explained. And it sort of is his odyssey with his partner, his love interest, played by Natalie Emmanuel, who is Julia, and his kind of back and forth antagonistic relationship with Giancarlo Esposito's character, who is Mayor Cicero. Trying to avoid spoilers for the meantime, what do you think of Megalopolis?
So for me, it's a film that you're less designed to enjoy and more one that you're supposed to think about. Because it's like all the ideas that are in it, I enjoy considering and talking about, but actually the story itself is less important. One thing Adam Driver spams in the movie is this notion that we need to ask questions. And this film seems obsessed with getting people to talk about stuff at the detriment of actually enjoying the film, it feels like.
Yeah.
This comparison of making a modern American society called New Rome, this idea that the modern day is still suffering from the problems that Rome suffered, which is to some degree, human society and human nature. We're still kind of suffering from the same symptoms that were even happening back then, to sort of take down the idea that modernism is a way of moving forward. We're actually more within sort of like a cycle where the species keeps making the same mistakes, the cycle of violence, the cycle of hatred, all of these things. And this idea that, is there an opportunity to kind of rise above them? But the problem with the movie is that all of these ideas are great, but the problem is, if you want to engage with ideas like this, honey, write a book. As much as you can give with a movie is ultimately felt beyond things to think about. So what I feel like we have here is sort of a better idea shoved into an inferior medium to transmit said ideas. It feels like, one thing as well, when you think about Megalopolis, you think it's going to be 3 hours. It's not. It's within the ballpark of what, 2 hour 15, 2 hour 30 minutes?
With credits, the runtime is probably 2 hours 10, yeah.
Like it's just not a big enough or efficient enough container for the amount of ideas that the film wants you to think about. And as a result of that, what movies do really well, the experience, the story, the drama, all of it suffers because it's just having to carry this huge load of extra ideas that are supposed to make you think about a grander vision of civilization. And then when it comes to actually what the solution to utopia is, despite that being drip-fed in the promotional material, it doesn't really deliver on its initial promises.
Yeah. I think I agree with what you said. It is so disjointed and so bizarre. I actually think that it's a really good experience to watch. Even though I was struggling and low-key falling asleep in the first quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, there is a lot to like there, but the whole film felt like it was one step forward, two steps back. It would like hug you, then it would smack you in the face. It was like, oh, this is quite a nice scene with some nice dialogue and some good performances, and then it's, oh, here's a hideous montage and things that just don't make sense and it just felt very disjointed throughout. It's just so hard to summarize. This film's famously, for those that don't know, Francis Ford Coppola, this has been his passion project that he's been thinking about, I thought from the 90s, but even earlier on than that. And it is entirely, as far as I'm aware, apart from distributors, entirely self-financed, meaning that he was basically the paramount creative direction of the whole thing. Obviously there was heads of department and things, but he was very much a very pure, unfiltered vision of his, which really shows. It really does feel like a passion project where he was just kind of throwing all his ideas in and everyone just went with it, and is a really, I guess, clear example and rare example nowadays of very, very little studio interference. It feels like a film from the 80s that was plucked and put in here, and it still might have not been critically well received in the 80s because there is the core flaws with it, with its story and pacing and dialogue and acting and delivery and things, but I think that it would have been better received as being more experimental back then, whereas nowadays I don't think it really succeeds in the modern landscape of cinema as well, because it does just feel so disjointed and so loosely hung together.
I think the thing that immediately grabs me about it, and something I was thinking about a lot during the screening, is this notion that it's not really designed for modern audiences. It doesn't really care about its present tense release. It cares about it superficially. I think what Coppola's banking on is the idea that you've got a product here that you can revisit over, rewatch it every 5 years, and you'll probably find something else in it.
Yeah.
My issue is I can't really review this thing right now. It's almost too early to tell. How to define a film experience is based on not just the product itself, but when the product is viewed. This notion that the way I see film, there are three things that really make the film experience. There's who you are, where you watch it, and when you watch it.
Yeah.
And that is what determines whether whether the information presented is of value to you. I think the film makes some very prophetic claims that, given how the progression of the world moves, might gain more value in hindsight. There may be more to consider here, because this film is very, despite it being this passion project of the past 40 years for Coppola, it does make a very conceited effort to involve the current politics of the age into what it's talking about.
Yeah.
But once again, the problem with this film is that I love all the ideas it's talking about, but the actual experience of watching the film can be like pulling teeth. A lot of these performances are really unfortunate, and I think it's because he's got everyone at his beck and call, and as a result of that, there's no one by his side saying, "I'm sorry, man, that was terrible. Do you want to do that again? Try it this way." No, you're not going to do that because he's paying everybody's salary, and the result is this dude has made a film that he loves and that everyone else is going to struggle with. And the result of this is you get something that feels almost a little uncanny. You get so many actors in this who really don't feel like they're playing characters.
Yeah.
They more feel like they're just kind of saying the lines without really feeling them.
Because I don't think, because it feels like it wasn't, this is how it feels, it might not be how it was on set. It feels like it wasn't the most collaborative process of making the film. There's obviously cross-department collaboration and things, but it doesn't feel like it was a sit-down and deep, thorough discussion of the characters with the actors. It was more, we're just playing how the characters have been described to us by Coppola.
It's like Coppola's like, I've been thinking about this for 40 years. I already know what you're going to do. You're going to do this, this, and this. You're going to do this. I want you to do it this way, which leads to some pretty mind-boggling moments in the performances, especially from Adam Driver. Bless him. He's doing the best with, I assume, what he's given, because no one in their right mind would immediately jump to the performances that he goes to. Some of the stuff he's asked to do. It's funny. Yeah. It is funny when it's not being boring.
I definitely think that this film and the discussion and the kind of hype and the culture around the film wouldn't exist if it was any other way, if it was by any other person. It exists in this controversial, thought-provoking middle ground because of Francis Ford Coppola and how it's to the film's advantage and also disadvantage that it is the way it is.
Yeah.
It's such a middle ground because it is, despite the film's flaws, it is quite nice to see a really unadulterated, just cinematic vision nowadays that's untampered, because it's just so rare to see. And you do still get that. Definitely in more recent years with like the Daniels with Everything Everywhere All at Once, for example. Like that, I'm not saying that pure cinematic vision isn't there anymore, but this really feels like this to the max. Like we said, because of that, no one was there to say no to him. And one of the things that I actually quite liked about the film is it does still feel like it is a bit of a commentary on modern cinema. Mm-hmm. Not to jump into spoilers too much, you can really tell that the subtext underlying it is him sort of talking about modern cinema. And in the film, at some point, Shia LaBeouf's character basically says to Adam Driver's character, "We're the same, you and me, power, family." But the difference is Adam Driver's character is meticulous and precise, and everything's clinical and clean in his creation of things, whereas Shia LaBeouf's character can create things as well, but it's much more rough around the edges, and he thinks there's more passion in it. And you could read that as Francis Ford Coppola's self-insert and commentary on modern cinema, being like, this is the modern landscape, and yeah, everything looks great with big budgets and things and successes, but it's too pure, it's too clinical. And I think it's kind of his commentary of him saying, like, this is what art looks like when someone just kind of like puts their heart into it, and even if it's not the best, it is just how it is.
Well, that's an interesting debate on that particular note, because I took it the other way round.
Interesting.
I took it as in order to, by doing the most human thing you can do, you perpetuate the cycle, because the cycle is defined by human nature.
Yeah.
And as a result, the idea that you could really argue, and this is a very pessimistic way of viewing things, you could argue that the current state of cinema is born out of sincerity, because people want to make the thing that the most people will like.
Yeah.
Because being disliked is tough and it's hard, and you don't want to upset people. It almost feels like the other way around, where Shia LaBeouf's character is this crowd pleaser, but Adam Driver is actually pursuing perfection, what it should really be, even if it hurts people.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of a chilling notion. The idea that a perfect society is beyond what's best for the individual.
Yeah.
Which, that's how you lead to National Socialism. And all kinds of predatory power structures and whatnot. And that's one thing, like, I always keep coming around to this, is this notion that I like the ideas that are in it, but, the plot, the structure, how everything moves in this film is just totally surf to the ideas it wants to talk about. And the result is you get kind of an unpleasant viewing experience. There are really long portions of this film where it's, as much as, you have the occasional crazy montage, which they look pretty corny, but they're fun at the very least. You can look at your mate and think, what the hell are we watching here?
There's some very goofy parts in it, but it is also like, you won't find that anywhere else. I guess more of an editing technique throughout is the use of the triptych, where there's the thick black lines, and there's 3 different shots going on at once, or one shot divided into 3s. I actually thought was quite cool.
To be honest with you, as split screen montages go, I really like this stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, I was like, hang on a minute, this is...
He's got something here.
As split screen goes, this is... I like this more than I normally do.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't really know why he was doing it, but that's something to think about. Another thing to think about.
Yeah.
Never ends with this man. The first scene of him is walking outside. It's a triangle behind him. 3 points, triptych, 3 lines. What are you telling us, Mr. Coppola?
Yeah, there is so much to think of, and it is, like you said, like, it's the surf and there's underlying things, and it does feel like you are just kind of wading through the film, being like, all right, what's really trying to be said here? And every now and then you'll get a plunge and you'll get a glimpse of, oh, this is... let's latch onto this, and there'll be a good beat, there'll be a good scene, and then it just goes back to stupidity and just very surface level exposition, wish-wash, and it's like, this is a bit, it just feels frustrating, because you're like, okay, we're getting into a groove here, this is good. It's like, oh no, we're back out of it again.
So I only read one review way back when it screened at Cannes.
Yeah.
And it made this point that it feels like Ford Coppola has been saving up a bunch of quotes over 40 years.
We'll put that one in.
He's just spammed them all in a single film. So it's like you've got people talking about, the politics of New Rome. And then someone goes, you are the snake in the grass, but have you considered the hawk in the sky? It's got nothing to do with what they're actually talking about. unless you spend at least 3 hours trying to piece it all apart. I just feel like he should have written the book. I feel like a book would have gone down a bit better. He would have had all the time in the world to talk about all these ideas.
Then you can just expand on these themes rather than trying to string them together with a really kind of poor plot.
There are 2 films, I think, that this film reminds me the most of. The first one is The Phantom Menace, and the second one is The Boy and the Heron.
Yeah.
The Phantom Menace, because there is no greater example of a film that is attempting to have everything smashed into it at the same time.
Yeah.
And the result being that it's almost, you get the occasional human being who's like, I genuinely watch that film for fun. But most people watch it in the same way that they would drink a 12-year-old rum. People don't actually like the flavour that much, but the heritage it carries and the subtleties of the experience, you know, are what draw people to it.
Yeah.
You know, I think The Phantom Menace is very similar in that way. And Megalopolis is similar. So much is shoved in. And then you've got something like The Boy and the Heron, which is this idea of a swan song film. This notion that we're kind of ending the sort of the big popular auteur wave is truly at its end. And now we have a bunch of these filmmakers, you know, Spielberg, Hayao Miyazaki, Ford, Coppola. Hell, you could even argue the Wachowskis with The Matrix 4. Like this notion that time's up. I gotta put a pin in what it all meant. I gotta do it now. I gotta summarize it all. There shouldn't be the insistence on summarizing it.
Yeah,
It's life.
I think that and some of them do nail it. I think I really like The Fabelmans, and you could say to some extent that Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well. But I do wonder why there does feel like there is sort of that rush to kind of make their legacy film. It might be age, it might be the dawning doomsday of AI and just the changing cinema landscape, and so they're like, we're just going to get in. Or it could also be post-pandemic, because post-pandemic, a lot of these directors came out and were like, "Oh, we're doing these projects at last." So it might just be a reaction to the state of the world.
And I wonder if a lot of the old filmmakers, it's almost too early to tell, because film is still a very young art form. The great thing about Megalopolis is that it's unprecedented. We've never really seen a film like this. No one's really done this in the way that they've done it. You know, Roland Emmerich spent 120 million making Moonfall.
Yeah.
But Moonfall sought not to express itself in the way that Megalopolis does. So in one thing, as much as I'm so torn on this film, I would say it's absolutely essential viewing. Because this is a cinematic experience. We haven't really seen a film of its ilk. You know, I'd say that the closest thing, more so than The Phantom Menace, is This Boy and the Heron. You know, where a guy has so much respect and so much capital that he can make his dream a reality. And then, as we as an audience watch that dream for the first time, the resounding feeling is disappointment. It's an interesting notion.
I think that you could almost view this film as almost like a filmic Rorschach test, in that even though it is quite impenetrable and it is just stupid and goofy and doesn't work for quite a lot of reasons, but I would urge anyone that's listening to this, if you haven't already watched it, to go and watch it. And I'm going to recommend to family and friends to go and watch it, just because I think it will provoke a lot of interesting conversations. I think people will more be in the negative camp than the positive camp. And when the dust settles, I think the kind of zeitgeist consensus will be that it isn't the best. But yeah, like I said, it being kind of like a filmic Rorschach, that it's just, what do you get out of this? What did you like? What did you dislike? What do you think of the themes? I think that there's a lot that different people can get from it, and even of different ages. I'd be so intrigued if I showed this to one of my grandparents. What would they think?
For sure.
Would it just be like, oh, this is just modern nonsense, or would they clock, oh, this feels very much like films of my day?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, this is a film I'm going to be revisiting at least every 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like it is so chock full of things to grasp. A lot of things, I'll be honest with you, the mix was, it was kind of tough to hear everything in the IMAX. You know, some people were mumbling.
Yeah.
It wasn't always clear. But no, this is a film I want to revisit throughout the rest of my life, because I feel like, you know, if it's made by an 80-year-old man, then as an 80-year-old man, I can probably get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of the target audience when I'm up there.
I think it is now and probably will continue to be quite a refreshing film. Like, with its flaws, it just feels so different. Like, modern Spielberg is probably the closest comparison I can draw, that it feels very much like a modern day classic in terms of its shots, scoring, story structure. It really doesn't feel conventional. There's pros and cons to that, but I think it is just refreshing to see something different.
Yeah.
especially this last weekend, we ended up not having much plans, and I ended up scrolling through the Odeon and the View cinema apps. I probably opened and closed them 4 or 5 times just to see what's on, and nothing really took my fancy. And that is because like we've been to cinema quite a lot recently, and there's things that we'd much rather watch on streaming services, but not a lot really tickle my fancy of like, oh, I don't really want to walk half an hour to go and watch this when it's just going to be kind of mid. I could rather just stay here and watch something that I know is going to be a bit better, or stay here and watch something that's offensively bad but funny. I don't really want to go to watch Beetlejuice or Lee or some kind of mid 6 to 7 out of 10 film. So I just kind of felt not like cinematically deflated, but nothing really picked my fancy. And something like Megalopolis is the antidote to that. It's a reason to go and watch it because it is so different.
Well, that's the thing, and as well, Megalopolis is scarce. This film is not in cinemas for very long. You know, the reason why it's so difficult to go to the cinemas these days is because streaming, as much as we still kind of try and keep things alive, streaming has killed the cinemas. Because you can just get it on your doorstep. This notion that you can basically just have a bag of crisps on your couch instead of having a larger bag of crisps that you've got to walk 40 minutes for.
So this is actually in the cinemas for a week.
Really?
It might vary view to view, but at the View Cinema it's in until next Thursday, so for 1 week. So it has actually picked up more of a distribution than I thought it would have.
Okay.
Hoping that word of mouth of its controversy will kind of carry, because I think the more people that see this, the better. Just because it is like, I would love if people like in my workplace saw this. It's such a fascinating like water cooler discussions of what do you think?
A real life legend, a great PR campaign, definitely helps a film. If the film Lee had been a disaster behind the scenes, we might be more inclined to watch it, because I suppose it's more relevant to our interests, but also it's not just distinct by its narrative that we can get anywhere. It's distinct by its very existence. It's a unique product because it was fashioned in a unique way. You know, it pains me to think that Boyhood took 12 years to make and it got them an Oscar, but it goes a long way. Ultimately, film is a technological spectacle at the end of the day.
It's very much the behind the scenes, the story that goes into the making of the art, because essentially it is a piece of art at the end of the day. It's the journey and the process that will compel people to go and watch it. Like if there was an art exhibition in Manchester and you knew nothing about anyone there, but someone was like, oh, this blind sculptor hand did this over 20 years and it's this stunning piece of art, you need to go and see it. You'd be much more compelled to go and see it as if you just saw a poster of a statue. And I think that applies also to films like this. Just knowing the story of the production adds more weight to the value of it. Because I was telling people earlier today, I'm going to see Megalopolis, like, oh, what's that? And it's like, oh, it's a new Francis Ford Coppola film. They might have seen the stupid pickaxe poster, but most people won't really know the story behind it. And so I'm hoping that travels and that more people are aware of that. Moving sort of into spoilers.
I'm going to grab a drink for this.
Yeah, go for it. It's kind of hard to talk about this because there isn't that much of a discernible plot.
It's really like, I could tell you things that happened in this film and it wouldn't spoil the film for you in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, Shia LaBeouf performs Cunnilingus on Aubrey Plaza in a completely unprecedented scene that comes out of nowhere, has no bearing on the plot, just kind of happens.
Felt so out of left field, so like, okay, why is this in here? I know it'll stir discussion online, but this is just so rogue that it just comes out of nowhere.
That's one of my favourite scenes. Another one is where Adam Driver gets shot in the head by a child. Dustin Hoffman plays this completely non-character in the whole film, and then he just disappears for like 10 minutes, and you think, where's he gone? And then suddenly, in like the equivalent of a Family Guy cutaway gag, it cuts to a 3-second shot of him screaming and being crushed by rubble. And I'm just like,
why?
Who conceived of this? Like, why is it done that way? Is it comedy? Everyone's dead serious. The scene's dead serious. A 30-minute chunk where Adam Driver does nothing but do drugs.
I need to address that the absolute trough of the film, the absolute low point, was the Colosseum. Everything.
You think it would be the best?
Because it's like this. Probably is the start of the second act, I guess. is just insane. There's some interesting discussions that happen, but then like Grace Vanderwall, who's a great musician, performs with her ukulele with multiple clones of herself while people bids
The
towards...
clones are never explained either.
No,
Why that happens?
I think it might be because she's wearing a dress made of the Megalopolis material,
yeah.
but like everyone's like donating towards her because she's the city's prized virgin, and then they show deep fake paedophile Adam Driver porn, and then he's just doing drugs in a montage, and the artist.
He keeps going like, time can't control our thoughts, think outside of time, which is stupid, depending on what you believe.
It's just never explained if he's just kind of spinning in circles, kind of like Doctor Strange time glitching while he's just doing coke and just chatting to people. It's just like, what is the purpose of this?
We haven't even talked about the second main character because she does so little.
Natalie Emmanuel, bless her. She's nice in Game of Thrones. She's charming, but she essentially just
her character is daughter of powerful man. The only tool she has is love. It's very, very, very traditional. This entire film is very traditional. The main bad guy is the guy who dresses up like a woman and is probably gay, and he's the big evil guy. You know, they keep talking about trying to imagine a new future by using precisely the exact same conventional means that people have been using for the last 100 years, let alone 1,000 years.
Yeah, very much so. It does feel dated in that regard. On the subject of performances, it does seem, obviously, Aubrey Plaza is having a blast. You can tell.
She is the best part of the film.
Or
at least my favourite.
She's the most consistent characterization.
That's true. That's really true.
She actually, whether just by her understanding or actually back and forth with Francis Ford Coppola, she actually had consistent motivations. Giancarlo Esposito, for the first 2/3 of the film, is actually like, he's acting this kind of cool, hyped up style, almost kind of like his characterization in like Do the Right Thing. Because he's just been so pigeonholed and boxed into playing Gus Fring in everything. He's like, he's actually got a bit of swagger to him. He's a bit more cocky with his back and forth Adam Driver. And then I think there's a time jump at some point after Adam Driver gets shot in the head.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of goes back to stoic, cold Gus Fring. And then it's never addressed, unless I just blacked out and missed it, how the conflict gets resolved. They're antagonists throughout the whole thing, and they has the discussion of, I'll offer you this evidence of how your wife died if you promise to like not love my daughter anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just never gets addressed, and then they're all happy on stage at the end. And it's like, when did this get resolved?
So that's an amazing part of the film. So in the film, Adam Driver is accused of killing his wife, who has absolutely no bearing on the plot at all, completely irrelevant to the story. But for some reason, for Coppola, it feels the need to express the fact that his self-insert didn't kill his wife. Giancarlo Esposito, he can act. That man can act fantastically. All of the actors in this are asked to play sort of caricatures. They're asked to play archetypes, but they're not the normal archetypes, they're Coppola's archetypes, so we can't even figure out what the deal is.
Yeah.
Giancarlo Esposito, his character doesn't have faith in humanity and feels like work with what you've got as opposed to what you ought to have. Realism versus idealism.
Yeah, I guess his, because he's the mayor of this new Rome, I think. So yeah, his sort of stance and his sort of viewpoint is more of, in opposition to Adam Driver's, let's revolutionize and rebuild and modernize and evolve. He's more of, let's just keep society as it is now, and rather than destruction and change, we'll just work with what we've got. Whereas Adam Driver is very much the opposite.
And then you've got Shia LaBeouf's character, who's this dude called Claudio. So do you know much about the Roman Republic?
Not lots.
So basically, before Rome took on its emperors and became a bona fide dictatorship, it is a republic. Caesar crosses the Rubicon, takes Rome, becomes the first emperor, turns it into a dictatorship. But the thing is, the senator that Caesar most disagreed with was a man called Cicero.
Okay.
It's a really bizarre connotation, because if we are to believe that Caesar is the way forward and Cicero is the way back, then it's this notion that he believes in some level of autocracy, where basically one visionary who just happens to be the best guy for the job somehow gets into power and has emergency level powers. It's a dictatorship, but the guy is running it. He's great, guys. Don't worry about it.
Emperor Palpatine. It's fine. Don't worry about
it. Coppola, it almost feels childish in the sense of for Coppola. I don't know. It almost feels like a failsafe. Oh, I technically believe in a dictatorship. Oh, but I've called him Caesar. So it could be bad.
It's fine, don't worry. Don't worry, he's cool, Caesar.
I could like a dictatorship, or what if I don't? So the result is something to think about. It's about asking questions. That's the thing that Adam Driver spams throughout this movie.
Yeah.
He wants people to ask questions. Because when people ask questions about the way forward, that is a utopia. Maybe he has a point in the sense of like, as long as you can question the power structures in a meaningful way, then maybe there's a way forward. But I mean, it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's certainly better than monarchies and serfdom. So I do understand what he's talking about in terms of the defense of free speech. But it's muddy and it's mired and it's so full of other things, and maybe that's the point, because I suppose you can't whittle down reality to a single political debate. My ruling feeling of the film is that it's difficult to figure out right now. Let history dull it down to 3 or 4 points that we can then say that was what it was about.
But I think that, I guess, in agreement, and also the counterpoint to that is that I think that this will remain polarizing. I think that, like, yes, there will be the consensus that I don't think this is going to go on to get any Oscars. I don't think this is going to...
Absolutely not. It doesn't deserve any Oscars.
I don't think there's going to be a swing in public opinion where it becomes a hit and everyone's like, actually, this is great. I never think it's going to reach that levels, but I do think that over time there will still be some people that will pull things from it. It won't just be let's just push that under the drawer.
It will have its cult following. There's no way this film will be allowed to be forgotten.
Yeah, even if it's meme status, I think that there will be.
And there are some good memes.
There's some good memes. There's some great lines. Adam Driver's like, "You're gonna go back to the club." It's like, shut up. Why did you say the line like that? Oh, we're missing out one of the best lines.
Coppola holding a gun to his head, like, say it this way. It this way. I don't know what the club is. Go to the club.
Adam Driver halfway through acts like he's like brain damaged. Well, I guess he was shot in the head, but he puts on this brain damaged performance for about half of one scene where he's like, no.
He's like crying for no reason.
Takes his bandages off, and then there's like Eastern Egyptian music where there's like 5 refraction clones of him looking down.
That was my favourite bit of the film. I lost it at that point. I'm like, and Aubrey Plaza's like, oh my god.
No, we're forgetting the best part of the film. I forget the guy's name, who's their uncle, who pretends to be sick in beds, and they walk in. Audrey Plaza dressed like Cleopatra, and then he's like, "It's my boner. Oh, if I was old enough, I bet we could still be doing things." And then he's like, "It's not a boner." And then he pulls back the sheets and really slowly, with a tiny bow and arrow, kills Audrey Plaza in one hit in the middle of the chest.
And then it's like horrible CGI blood.
Oh, that actually made me cry laughing. That was so funny. He just really slowly,
like cherub bow,
rather than like trying to swat it out of his hands from the old decrepit man. They just stand there and look shocked and get shot in the heart. It's so stupid.
It's a truly powerful. You know what? That is probably the highlight of the film. If you're gonna see the film, you gotta see it for that. It's my boner, my bow and arrow. The pun doesn't even work. It doesn't even work. Why did you do that to us?
Honestly, that was one of the funniest. And also the iconic line.
1, 2, 3, yippee yee. What a powerful line that had no bearing on the plot and was just said for, I don't know, no reason. There's no reason that line ought to be, but it was so good apparently that it's in all of the trailers. It's like a warning. It's like they're asking people not to watch the film.
This is the quality.
This was the deadest IMAX I've ever seen. Deadest opening night IMAX I've ever witnessed in my life.
Which is kind of sad. The director of Apocalypse Now and The Godfathers. What's the Dracula one called? Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I think it's just, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
The director of all of these classic hits, with this film, there's just been no fanfare around it. So yeah, I guess to sort of put in a bookend on the discussion, how would you kind of summarise your feelings for this insane, polarising film?
I'm not going to have a concrete opinion on this film for like until at least the next rewatch, but I feel like this film is betting on the idea that it's going to be revisited over a very long time.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I recently rewatched The Phantom Menace, and quite frankly, I hated it. So, if Coppola's Gambit pays off, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, some films definitely do dull over time, and some become a bit more refined. And I guess there's an element of revisionism in it, but I don't think this will be revisionism. I think it's more people will get different things from it. Yeah, I guess my feelings are that it is a mixed bag, and because of the pros and cons, it probably does average out to be some kind of like 3-star, like 6 out of 10 for me. The bad bits are rough, and there was points where I really couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel in the Colosseum montages and aspects. But I think that there's enough gems in it to make it a worthwhile watch. It is kind of like nuggets of gold throughout this kind of mess.
Yeah.
But to call it a mess has the negative connotations that the whole thing's bad, whereas like this film is really panning for gold. Is that you know that there's going to be some good things in here, it's just sitting through the not so good things to wait for the next.
That's a very good way of describing it. It really does feel like panning for gold.
Yeah, which is kind of insane that the director of The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 and everything, that this is kind of what it is.
But you remember it's also the director of Jack, with Robin
Yeah.
Williams.
Yeah.
You know, his entire career is panning for gold, but he just happened to be, you know, working out of a gold mine most of the time.
Yeah.
Jack is a rock. There's nothing in Jack.
So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for joining again, Dan.
A pleasure to be here as always, sir. A pleasure to be here. Was the last one Civil War? We didn't do one on I Saw the TV Glow.
No, I think there's been a few films that we've seen together that were kind of a lot to unpack, and we were like, how do we really do this as a podcast? Like, I Saw the TV Glow, The Substance.
Oh, yes.
And then there's been a few more re-releases, but
The Substance is the best film of the year so far, in my opinion. Well, actually, I like Civil War, TV Glow, and Substance. They're my 3 favourites.
I think it's hard off the top of my head, but I think like Challengers, Dune Part 2, Civil War, Substance.
It's been a good year
It's been a good year,
It's been a pretty darn good year.
This is before the incoming tidal wave of all the London Film Festival things,
you're
like
absolutely right.
like Blitz, Bird, Anora, A Real Pain, Piece by Piece, the Pharrell thing. So there's a lot to look forward to. And I think that probably might be one of the, if not the next episode, one of the episodes coming after that will be a kind of like London Film Festival film discussion about a few films, which would be pretty cool.
Oh, terrific.
So yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of the Home Screen Podcast. If you've enjoyed it, feel free to give this episode a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to it on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Give us a like, a subscribe, follow us on social media, and we look forward to having you with us in the next one. Thank you. Goodbye.
Take care.